we've heard a lot about how consumers have drastically changed what products they're looking for, how they shop, and what they want from a brand in terms of sustainability and values. And yesterday I said that while 99% of shoppers have purchased a natural or organic product, there is one consumer group that is often driving the interest in a lot of these categories, and that's the wellness shopper. The good news is for you that a lot of your products are exactly what this wellness consumer is looking for and is seeking out. So here to provide us advice on targeting this consumer, why they're so valuable to you, and exactly what they're looking for is Elizabeth Stein, founder and CEO of Purely Elizabeth, Neda Daneshzadeh, the co-founder and partner at Prelude Growth Partners, and Colleen Wachob, who is the co-founder of mindbodygreen. Please join me on stage. Yeah. Take a seat anywhere. Pick a chair. This is a great last all-female panel, if I can be a little biased. So to start, I want to learn a little bit more about each of you. And Elizabeth, since you're kind of our brand representative on the panel, let's talk about Purely Elizabeth. So how did the company come about, and what is Purely Elizabeth?
So I started the company 10 years ago, and at the time I was actually a holistic nutritionist. So really before wellness was wellness, and had gone back to school to study holistic nutrition, learning about all of the incredible ingredients that we use in our products today, and really saw an opportunity subconsciously of starting a food brand that included better for you and really better tasting products.
And what products do you have now?
Today we have granola, oatmeal, and bars.
And I know a lot of that growth actually happened in Whole Foods originally. So Neda, you're a partner at an investment firm. Who are some of your portfolio brands that are connecting with this wellness shopper?
Sure. So we have a number of companies that are focused on the wellness shopper. I think everybody should be focused on the wellness shopper. But we invested in a brand called 8 Greens, which is a wellness ingestibles brand. Dawn Russell, a female founder, took 8 different real whole greens, spinach, spirulina, kale, dehydrated them down, and bound it into various form factors, effervescent tablets, gummies, and the core consumer there is clearly a wellness consumer. We recently invested in Banza, the chickpea-based pasta brand, and there is a very heavy marketing and consumer bent towards the wellness shopper as well. So those are 2 of them.
And then you also have non-edible brands as well that seem to be targeting this consumer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think obviously it's not just what you put in your body, but now today what you put on your body, given the skin barrier. So we have a number of brands in personal care, in beauty, makeup, skincare, which is key as well, given makeup you're putting on your face, on your lips, around your body, and obviously through skincare seeping into your body. So those are key categories where, you know, there's astronomical growth being driven in those categories by the wellness consumer.
And let's talk mindbodygreen. This is probably one of the most influential platforms for the wellness shopper. How did it get its start? And for those folks who are maybe not as familiar, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so like Elizabeth, mindbodygreen started before the word wellness was really in the zeitgeist. This was 10 years ago, before the onslaught of SoulCycle, green smoothies. And for us, we weren't actually aiming to create a wellness media company. We believed that physical, mental, spiritual, and environmental well-being were really vital and important, and no one was really talking about these things. So hence the birth of mindbodygreen.
And you guys have evolved since then beyond just being a content platform.
Yeah, I think like many modern media companies, for us, it's really transcended content. We have a very large experiential opportunity and events business, which we think is so important. Started way back early in our days in 2013 with the promise of bringing our community together, and we find that that's so important for our audience. And then we also recently launched our first consumer products, and we also have a huge digital education focus. We've had that business since 2013. We're a mission-driven company, and we think it's important not just to give our audience the tools in a written format, but wellness is all about learning and doing, and people in our audience want to take their level of expertise to the next level. So we connect them with the world's leading experts within wellness education.
So tell us a little bit more about how you guys define this consumer. You touched upon, wanting to be more engaged. Are they a very educated consumer? Who kind of is your sweet spots that you're thinking about?
Yeah, for us, our core consumer is this wellness consumer, and it's really something that we've learned is a mindset. So it's not necessarily an age demographic, but this mindset of living your best life, of a holistic view where it's not just what someone's putting in their body, but understanding that exercise is important, that sleep is important, that what they're putting on their skin is important. And that's really the mindset of the consumer that we're targeting in our core.
I think I would also say, just a different bent is what we just heard before, which is the shopper really cares about authenticity, and she cares about the brands deeply. And so she wants to know that the brands, where they came from, who founded it, what was the purpose behind the brand, what was the mission behind the brand. And that becomes a really critical part of their experience with the brand. And not just that, but is it a brand that's aligned with my values? Is it something that I want to be associated with? And I think that is taking on a life of its own, and that's a critical component to what she cares about and how she makes decisions. And then secondly, obviously, we talk about it a lot, and it's a buzzword, but transparency. She wants to make sure that she trusts this brand in terms of what the brand is communicating about the label, the packaging, perhaps now much more sustainability, but these are all the things that she cares about.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what's been said. We definitely think of our audience in terms of a psychographic and not a demographic. We think of them on a spectrum of well-being, so that can be wellness aficionados, people who have been into this before it was cool. We think of wellness explorers. Those are people who are going in to solve a personal problem, whether it's blood sugar, whether it's inflammation. Perhaps there's a personal health issue that no one has been quite able to figure out. And then the largest part of our audience is what we call wellness newbies. These are just proactive health seekers, and they know that it's just the way that you should live today. But what transcends all of those people on the spectrum is really a values-driven approach. Values are really table stakes with our audience. It's not, I think maybe like 5-10 years ago, it was the start of this 1% movement, or where people were donating a certain amount of their profits and really feeling the need to articulate that to the audience, and that was considered a values-driven company. But now we feel that with the brands that our audience gravitates through, it just needs to be embedded in absolutely everything they do, from the packaging to the messaging to the brand ambassador choices.
How important is, you mentioned community. So how important is this feeling like you're part of a bigger group of people that all share these similar values?
Hugely. I think, especially within a world in which people are struggling with their relationship with technology, the activation points in real life to connect with people who are at similar life stages and trying to solve similar problems is hugely important. And people are really wanting to get that IRL interaction, but also, I kind of cringe at the word, but looking to find their tribe.
Why do you cringe at the word? Yeah, you guys all kind of like, is this an overused term? Yeah. Should brands not be using the term tribe anymore? Do you stay away from it, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Okay, take note.
I do think, though, we're sitting here at a food conference. I think there are cues from other categories. Whether you think about the fitness category or you think about even the beauty category with a brand like Glossier, I think their brands and other categories have done a good job of building community and that level of engagement within their customer base. And I think we'll start to see that seep more into the food space.
You guys touched, I think this idea of community is interesting because it speaks to how do you target these consumers. So where can brands find them? What's a good way to find these pockets of communities, both digitally and in real life? Elizabeth, where are you guys trying to reach shoppers?
on mindbodygreen. They have an upcoming consumer event this year. And no, I mean, truthfully, that is really our core consumer. And so we know that that's such a great fit for us. It's very, speaking about values, I think it's been wonderful for us because it is so authentic to having a person behind the brand and really having that connection with our consumers, that it feels like that authenticity that we can find them in these natural places where we would show up.
Where are you advising your kind of portfolio companies when they want to reach out to these shoppers?
Look, I think there's no silver bullet, so there's no one obvious place. I think it's a multi-pronged strategy, and so we spend a lot of time thinking about that strategy. I think obviously the right influences can be incredibly helpful. So, and I think founders themselves, if they're excited about that strategy, there are founders that spend a disproportionate amount of their time really harnessing and building that. I think there are influencers that you can just send product to, and you'll get that kind of level of engagement. But you can, if you find the right influencers and engage with them and spend time with them, that can be very fruitful. I think obviously there are agencies and resources that help you identify them, track how strong the performance is. But clearly that is one venue. I think events, and look, at the end of the day, this consumer, because of the values and authenticity, they want to engage it with the brand in real life, in a real life setting. So events and can be huge. I think for one of our brands, for example, 8 Greens, we actually did with the founders an on-the-ground onslaught in New York City, where we took, it's such a densely populated part of the country, obviously, but we went into one particular neighborhood and created a very specific sample with the attributes and what the brand was about, and the founders and a street team was giving these out, encouraging them to go and engage with the brand. And that leads to a very different start of how you engage with the company and their first experience with the company. And we saw in those zip codes a 300% growth on our website. So I think there are creative ways, but I think that in-person or people advocating is key.
And that's really great to hear, because sometimes we hear, oh, field marketing is less important, events are less important because of digital connections and social media. But it sounds like for this shopper, engaging face-to-face is still really important. So it has become a rather, shall I say, cluttered space sometimes. There's a lot of brands targeting this shopper with different products and sometimes saying, you're doing it wrong, do it this way. So how do you kind of break through the noise and really resonate with these shoppers?
I think other women have brought up this word of authenticity, and I think it's a hugely important point. First we had greenwashing, and now there's a little bit of wellness washing going on, where everyone's invested in wellness and everyone's authentic. And I think people really need to find a point of view and a way to cut through in a way that is authentic. I do think, related to the influencer space, that we've reached peak influencer. As we think of how we market both our ecosystem across the board, from both a media and education and a products standpoint, we're really thinking much more in looking for domain experts. Not really the sexiest of terms, but I'm very follower agnostic in terms of I could care less how many followers someone has. I really care about the authenticity, the credentials that they're bringing, because I think that's something that's sorely lacking in a lot of the wellness marketing right now.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think we heard that a little bit yesterday, where, I don't know, a celebrity that may be into wellness engaging with your brand, the likelihood or the tail of that is going to be very short. And it's less about how many followers somebody has, but truly the level of passion about your brand. And do they genuinely get your brand and understand your brand? And I think that is much more. So we have a lot more success with actually micro-influencers and smaller followings, but ones that genuinely get the business and the brand.
do the true core wellness shoppers have kind of a high radar for BS and like fake claims?
Very high.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I think, we're living in a world where there is some backlash against, a lot of what's happening within the Instagram world of bright and shiny and not a lot of science behind it. I think there's a lot of fluff right now, and our core audience is very curious. And what we are doing as a media company is taking a lot of these stories that are really complicated to tell, that a lot of times have lots of data and rigor behind them, and trying to share them in a consumer way, because it's a very confusing landscape.
And Elizabeth, you recently launched a product that has some functionality to it. Tell us a little bit about that line, the collagen line.
It's so good.
So we recently came out with a line of collagen protein oatmeal, so on-the-go cups that really we saw that our consumers were taking our existing oat cups and adding collagen into it. And so on a personal level, I was eating it as my protein of choice all the time, and thought this gives the consumers really what they're looking for, and in an accessible way. And I think that's something that we've really tried to do across the board in our product line, where we've been really first to market in a lot of products and maybe a little bit ahead of the consumer, but really giving that consumer the accessibility where they may be hesitant to buy an entire tub of collagen, say, and spend that money and unsure of what it tastes like, but here's an ability for them to enter into the market with a $2 cup of oatmeal and see how it feels and tastes.
Now, with that sort of high threshold for sussing out true, authentic functionality, how are you conveying that this is a product that actually works and will have benefits versus collagen dusting? Because there are certainly many products out there with everything from turmeric to collagen to, yes, CBD added in, and the efficacy is kind of unclear.
I think for us that we've across all of our products, really taken this standpoint of being this accessible and not in your face, and not kind of segmented to, if you're only eating this dietary way, then to eat our product. And so it's more that it's actually subtle and not trying to claim all of these things, because it's just, we're believing in the product, and that's what it is.
I also appreciate that you have collagen oats, but then you also have unicorn oatmeal. So they're pink, blue, and yellow,
Yes.
right? So there's room for fun and functionality. And I think that's really important, is that sometimes I see wellness brands getting so serious so fast, and they forget that this is food. So for this consumer, though, functionality is important. How have you guys found, does taste still matter? Is that important at all?
Yeah, I think that's really been what has made us successful. And ultimately, the consumer is so much different today than they were when I started 10 years ago. And taste is so important still. And really being able to reach that consumer who, I always say, it's like my dad is the threshold, that if he is this consumer who eats hot dogs and yet he likes our products, we're really able to then reach so many more people and provide healthier products.
Yeah, look, I think, at the end of the day, whether you talk about, 8 Greens was a company that in its first full year sold 4 million tubes of its product, and that was really down to, there are lots of green products out there, lots of different ways to get your greens, but they cracked the taste. I think with a product like Banza, the holy grail is to be able to get as close as you can to great taste. At the end of the day, taste matters, but hopefully you can also deliver a more densely nutritious food. And but look, success is all based around taste. There's nothing more important.
And I think there's a discerning consumer who is looking for efficacy across the board, whether we're talking about cereal or whether now, more in the clean beauty space. People aren't going to buy the products unless they're great replacements to the products they've grown up with. And so you have to deliver on both elements of it.
And speaking of functionality, a topic that keeps coming up is CBD and cannabis. So how are you seeing the wellness shopper integrate that into their lives? Are they integrating that in their lives? Are they interested in it? Tell us more. Are we going to see CBD collagen oats or cannabis oats?
I don't think so.
Our audience continues to be curious about CBD, full spectrum hemp. I think what on a macro level is really interesting to me about the well-being customer now versus 10 years ago is early on in the days of mindbodygreen, our audience was coming to us from a food and nutrition standpoint. Now, the biggest issue that's facing our audience and what they're looking for us to help shepherd and guide them through is really issues around mental fitness. So mental fitness to them is just as important to health and nutrition, and I think that's where the CBD and full spectrum hemp conversation comes into play, that anxiety and stress are just really critical issues if you're talking about greater well-being.
I like that you brought up the term fitness, because something that came up at the office when we were talking about this panel was the difference between the fitness consumer and the wellness consumer. And yes, there's mental fitness, but there's also a lot of products that are less targeting wellness and more targeting fitness. What's the difference between these shoppers? Have you guys found any differences in what they're interested in or how they are resonating with products?
I mean, to me, it is one consumer. You're not going to go to a morning soul cycle class and then head on over to McDonald's. You're probably going to pick up some Elizabeth's Oats after that class and feel good about yourself. I think these, whether it's mental, physical, spiritual, environmental, like our core belief on well-being is that all these things are connected. You can't, go to a yoga class and then, disregard other elements of your health and wellness.
One question we did have come in from the audience is that we've used the pronoun she a lot.
Yay.
Are there male wellness consumers?
There are. I know there are, because they're coming to our site each and every day, and that is one of the evolutions that we've seen. Is I think when we do think of that well-being customer, it tends to be the woman who has that life epiphany, often has a health event. Maybe it's a pregnancy. We know on our site that 2 of the top 10 search terms when people are on our site are pregnancy. So it, yes, indeed, is an inflection point. But I have a 45-year-old male co-founder, male co-CEO, and these issues are becoming much, much more topical for the male audience as well, and we're seeing growth in that cohort.
Look, at the end of the day, she is making all the household purchase decisions, or the vast majority of her. So she is the queen that we think about day and night.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry. But look, having said that, when we did our consumer work around Bonza, there was an incredible millennial male spike for that brand. So obviously, men participate and they matter. And they are engaging more and more, but it is she that dominates.
Yeah, I would say for us, we've definitely seen a greater amount of male consumers, and really hear so many stories of, I got my husband, my boyfriend, my what have you, into the brand, and now I have to hide it from them. So it's definitely an entryway that I think they get introduced and then become that wellness consumer.
I think part of the interesting thing and why this trend has expanded is because we're seeing channels for food products. We're seeing non-traditional channels pick up food items. So Sephora has a edible wellness set. One of my favorite products there is Four Sigmatic. They have a line that you can eat and put on your face at the same time. Multi-use, it's great. I've seen wellness food products in Urban Outfitters, Nordstrom. They're really becoming pervasive. So how are you seeing consumers discover these products? And Elizabeth, for you, are you thinking about these other retail channels now?
Yes, I think, it's so interesting how much the landscape has changed, and thinking about, 10 years ago, I didn't think we would get beyond, the tiny co-op store. So it's incredible, the shift, and it certainly seems like a great opportunity to be able to be in all of those different areas where it's unexpected, and certainly more so for food, because I feel like much of it is really the ingestible beauty right now in those places, but even just being able to have healthier options for people when they're on the go.
Yeah, look, I think these retailers realize that this is where the growth is coming from. This consumer, this wellness consumer is an incredibly valuable consumer, and you've got the wave that's going to come. We're just at the very beginning of the power of this consumer, broadly defined. So you are seeing, a Sephora, an Ulta, a QVC, Anthropology, Urban Outfitters, Nordstrom, department stores are all absolutely putting big investments and innovation, even if the productivity may not be there versus the core of what they sell. They are significantly investing behind that, and that's great because there are other venues. But I also think, importantly, there are lots of alternative channels and places where you want to think about consumers discovering your product, whether it be brands that are aligned with your brands, whether it be hotels or gyms or what we call alternative channels. I think spending time thinking about that as places, because there's just a lot of receptivity.
So a question that came in is, in addition to new channels, a big source of discovery is Gwyneth and her platform and Instagram and sharing. And so one question was, how do you feel about that involvement? Has it opened more doors? Has it been, there have been many stories about how this is a negative thing for the industry. How do you guys approach this?
Do you want to answer? Look, I don't think it's a negative. I think Goop is a very powerful platform. I think the more people that get educated about what's happening and wellness broadly is a good thing. One of our brands is the #1 seller on Goop. It's a clean makeup brand called Westman Atelier. So, we welcome that platform.
So think of it more as another channel to add to your arsenal, along with the Nordstroms and Sephoras and mindbodygreen and other platforms to engage with.
Yeah, look, I think people have a personal opinion about Gwyneth, which people have, but I think broadly the platform can be powerful to educate.
So we just have a little bit more time left, but I want to touch upon something that's kind of been leveraged against the wellness shopper and wellness products, is that oftentimes the price point is a little higher. How do you see brands trying to be more accessible? Do you see a wider range of consumers coming to you or your platforms? And how far can this go if the price point does kind of stay in this more premium place?
I guess I have a slightly different view of the wellness consumer. To me, the wellness consumer is the consumer. If you're not in the wellness business now, you're going to be in 2 or 5, 10 years from now, or your brand is probably going to be antiquated. And just like with conventional products, there's different price points at which you can engage. And I think the fact that previous speaker was from Whole Foods Market, which was purchased by Amazon, you can't get too much more mainstream than that. And just with conventional products, you have a range of price points. You're going to see that within wellness too. I think the movement started at a more premium price point, so there is a little bit of perhaps a residue or effect there, but brands like Purely Elizabeth and so many others in the space are really making this movement accessible. I've really admired from afar the work that Walmart's done in terms of reshaping their portfolio. Target is definitely a leader in, and these are mainstream retailers that have the ability to move markets, which I think is what this movement needs to recognize its full destiny.
Yeah, it's amazing walking into a Target, and I was browsing, and there's a whole edible beauty set now in Target. I also noticed that one of the ways to engage with this consumer is find that accessible price point initially, be it a cup of oats, or I know 8 Greens also offers, like they've been sampled in Sephora Play, and find a way to show them the entrance to this space first. How do you guys approach pricing, Elizabeth? How do you think about that?
I think having that smaller size so that there is the ability to try and being able to, back to where to find the consumer, being at events and just getting the product in people's mouths so that they can sample it and try it, be exposed to something they may have never been exposed to before. And to the point about Walmart, I mean, they're really just so ahead of the time on trends and really wanting to bring these better for you products to scale in their network.
When you're dealing, though, with a Walmart shopper, or a Target shopper, do you advise that brands talk to them differently? Is there more education that has to go on?
I think that there's definitely more work to be done. So from our standpoint, how can we educate and connect with them?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for educating our audience today. I really appreciate you sharing your insight. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ring that bell.